Welcome once again to Beyond the Lane, your weekly home for League of Legends professional discussion, hosted by myself, Jared Wynn, and much more importantly, co-hosted by my lovely guest. Well, not my guest, my lovely friend, my bestie, my co-host, Yamato Cannon. Yamato, how's it going?
Pretty good. You always somehow top your intros with something else. I am truly impressed, Jared.
Just wait, I will continue that. Trust me. I will have up where to go from here, but let's not get too far into that. Let's get into right away the great meaty promotions and playoffs that went on this past week. Well, the promotions that went on, the playoffs to come. Starting with the promotions in North America, we have Cloud9 Challenger, or Cloud9 2, just basically another Cloud9 team. Echo Fox and Phoenix 1 returning to the LCS next season. Any surprises for you in those three teams?
I think, I didn't, I think it would be like a lie for me to say that I watched all of these series wholeheartedly, but like if I had to make predictions, it would be these three teams. And it is based off of one factor alone. It is usually when teams come into relegation, both LCS teams and Challenger Series teams, it's all about their mental fortitude. It's usually like these long, drawn-out series where it's something like at the end of a game that matters. And I think mental fortitude is the key in these series. And Cloud9, I think everyone expected them to get through. But the other two, Echo Fox and Phoenix 1, they didn't have the best split ever, but they still had those glimpses of hope. You could see that they were still well put together as a team, and that you had that kind of family feel coming from these teams. Phoenix 1 with the defeat against TSM, I think that brought them together more than anything else. Echo Fox as well, their owner seems like their, big brother or dad or something that takes care of them and gives off this family vibe. And I think mental fortitude coming into these best of fives is what really, really matters.
With Cloud9 in particular, it's just another Cloud9 team. It's kind of a topic of discussion now. Is it fair for Cloud9 to have two teams? And again, it's not even like a separate, AAA team or minor league team. It's just another Cloud9 team, like the substitute players. It's still High, it's still Elimination. Well, High is now apparently retired again. We'll see how that goes. Is it okay for you think, to have one organization have two teams qualify for the LCS and basically just have to sell one off now like this?
I think, the way everything is set up, the way Challenger is set up, I think it just makes sense to do it. I think it's a very valid business strategy. Like I've had considerations myself in the past in Season 3 that I just pick up 4 players that I consider really, really good. Even like top tier players, I remember talking about with Nuktak, and just farming LCS teams because it's just so profitable. And I think as long as it's set up the way it is with the Challenger Series system, then I think people will keep doing this.
Is it healthy, though, for the league?
It is just, I don't see a solution. I don't see how you solve the situation with Challenger. I think it does, in some sense, I feel like it will kind of solve itself eventually. Because, the league right now is very saturated with the best players. So obviously, Challenger Series teams are going to struggle to find these better players, and sometimes you're going to have scenarios like Misfits or Cloud9 where there is a big investment coming in to seal that spot. And I think as people recognize the value of these spots even further, and as we proceed, I think the Challenger Series, in a sense, will become more competitive, and even more competitive, because, C9 see the value, they just went in there and seized it, and I think a lot more teams will invest into getting these spots. So in a sense, I think it breeds competition.
Let's talk about that investment, though, because we've had teams here in Echo Fox and Energy who are both playing for spots. One made it, one did not. They both had significant investment in the teams recently. Are investors going to be discouraged from coming in and contributing money to esports teams and to League of Legends teams in particular if they feel like there's a significant risk that, one season in, they could be on the outs, no longer having the spot they paid for?
I think the people that have these sums of money, let's say you need about $2 million to run a team and buy a team for the minimum duration of a split with organizational things and buying slot, etc. Let's say 2 million, right? I don't think anyone that has $2 million and they are willing to spend this money don't realize the actual risk in an investment. Like, of course, the risk is very obvious. There's a chance you might not requalify or you might get kicked out, and then there's a chance you might receive and gain a lot of value. I think any investment, I think the word investment is kind of defined by this. You take a risk with your capital, and there's a chance that it might not go as you kind of imagine it or hope it to go. And I think with that in mind, I don't think this changes at all, because anyone with $2 million and willing to invest it into League understands the risk. And I think Energy is just a sad case where the risk didn't pay off.
That sounds good, but do you think it's in Riot's interest to make it more reliable for an investor to come in and put money into their game, really put money into marketing their game, rather than having an investor be afraid of, not having that pay off for them?
I think, that there are also a lot of teams that kind of think that, you make an investment and then they kind of just leave it alone. I think in a lot of cases, Energy kind of just tried to make it easy for themselves. Well, they just picked up players that they recognize by name. They picked up a coach that they recognize by name, and they just thought that alone is going to carry them to stay in the LCS. And I think it's more complicated than that. I think even though there is risk, I think you can kind of step away from this risk if you put more energy and time into it, because there is a lot of success stories where hard work has truly paid off, and it's not just rolling a dice being an LCS.
Well, if you think the Challenger system is fine, having the promotion and relegation is fine, is it possible that Riot could make the Challenger series more visible so that investing in a team in League is okay, even if you might have a team go down to Challenger? It still remains a decent investment at least.
Well, it's just, I think Challenger series, it's a tough pickle, because I still feel like the quality of Challenger series and the teams in Challenger series is just not worth watching. I think there is a fair point in the fact that Riot could do more in giving Challenger series exposure, but I feel like we're slowly getting there. The main casters from regions are starting to cast the games, and I think the league system and how it's being broadcasted, I think it's definitely a step in the right direction. I feel like Riot somehow can do more. I don't know, I can't really explain the feeling I have, but it just feels like they could do more. But in a sense, I think as we move on, and I feel like we're just at the point where both leagues are going to be saturated with players. I think slowly, the Challenger Series teams also are going to be saturated because of the reasons I mentioned before with the C9 example.
Now, Monte Cristo weighed in. Everyone wants to hear what Monty says about most things, actually, in the scene. I think we have that available. Yes, we have. The most important factor behind the franchising relegating argument is the one thing no one talks about: team equity in the league. So again, another discussion towards what you're getting out of your investment. Do you think Monty has a strong point there? Is that to be considered?
I don't know. I think it feels weird jumping right off to team equity. I feel like the comparison between franchising and the actual system we have now is kind of more important. I feel like when it comes to franchising, I feel like it definitely benefits the big dogs, the investors, but I feel like in a sense it doesn't breed competition, because you don't get punished for mediocrity, you don't get punished for doing bad. You kind of favor having players that are more famous, and I think also some people have made the argument that it's safer for players and it's going to be a better environment, but that is not the case. I don't think franchising helps that at all. Good players are going to stay in and bad players are going to get cut. I think that happens in any type of league system. in general, with franchising, I think it is, in a sense, I can see from an economic point of view that it makes sense, but it is only for the big dogs. I think in terms of competition, it is not good. And I think the main issue we have with monetizing the league is in the broadcasting rights, and that's something that Monte Cristo also raised as a point.
Yeah, that's very important, obviously. We have all this investment coming into esports, having reliable return, reliable profit through monetization of broadcasting rights and things like that. That's how traditional sports leagues make their money, you know, through ticket sales and through broadcast rights, especially nowadays, with that being such a big thing. Live sporting broadcasting is so vital to, you know, cable companies, for example. So obviously a lot to unpack there. Sticking on this for a moment longer, though, you mentioned that the competitive integrity is important because you have players, well, you have teams feeling the need to stay competitive so don't get relegated. Do you think it'd be a real risk, or if you had teams assured of not being relegated, they would kind of flounder and not bother to pay good players, not bother to have good teams?
I think, you know, it is also, I think the question that also needs to be raised, you know, with this in mind, it's, you know, the league wouldn't punish mediocrity. I think that would be a big issue. I think also the fact, how do you decide which 10 organizations in a region are the best ones? I think it is good that we give opportunities to these new organizations with these new leaders and new ideas. I think it's very healthy for a league to have that. Sometimes you get bad ones, sometimes you get good ones, because I think it's very, very hard to make sure you find the 10 best organizations. How can you guarantee that? And I think the system right now gives these new ideas an opportunity, and I think that is healthy for the competitive integrity of the scene.
Is there a point down the line where you think it'd be beneficial to have 10 teams or 12 teams be the franchises in the LCS in each region and have that be a set thing, maybe where down the line that it becomes more clear, or should we stick to a relegation system? Is that healthier long term?
I think it really comes down to how the game kind of develops and how it grows. I think if what I predict with the Challenger Series happens, then I think it will be fine. I think it is, you know, with franchising, I just compare it to what is going on with, for example, like I think franchising is happening in the NFL. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is it happening in the?
There might be expansion there. They relocated some franchises actually from one location to the other. The NHL Hockey League had a new franchise come in Las Vegas.
I just, you know, like I'm so used to European sports, you know, I'm following what I call football, you know, soccer. And it is just so normal for me that relegation systems are in place. And I think the Premier League and any major soccer league is a proof that it does indeed work. So I don't think you necessarily need to jump into franchising for the long term, because a long-term solution as the relegation system has been proven that it works.
I thought you meant like new franchises. Yeah, to be clear, all the major American sports leagues have franchises be a part of their operation. Yeah, and they all have a stake in the league. You know, the franchise owners have a big say in what happens in the league. You know, they're kind of the executive board of the league, basically, with the commissioner of the league having a run of it. So really, in the case of League, you have a very different situation, League of Legends, I should say, where Riot controls the game. The owners have, you know, some sway, but not a tremendous amount necessarily, unless they all board together as one. Whereas in the franchise system, you have the owners really having the bulk of the sway, and the league and the commissioner of the league really answers to the owners. So imagine if, you know, the LCS and really League of Legends as a whole was dictated by the owners of TSM and Cloud9 and Splyce and whomever else. You know, that's a very different situation. And at this point, with the youth of our ownership, maybe not the best situation to get into. But this is all very obviously a very complicated situation we could talk about for many hours with many facets to it. Getting back, go ahead.
And I think, you know, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, because I feel like with how Riot views things, I feel like they want to have the cake and eat it too, because, you know, it's their game, and I don't feel like they are willing to let go of anything. And I think as long as that is in place, I think the point that was raised earlier that Monte Cristo raised with team equity is very relevant. And I think Riot, I get the vibe that they are not willing to let go of anything. And I think that is kind of holding everything back.
They seem to be pretty stubborn on that front. And you can understand, though, if they have all the rights themselves, if they have everything, why would they want to give some of it up? I guess the long-term health of the game, but then are they concerned with the long-term health of the game, or are they concerned with making more money from it?
It is just, like there are multiple rioters that, they have the vision that League of Legends is a game that will be played on for generations and generations. And I think if that is going to happen, and, if that is going to happen, I think, with all the sports that have been played for generations and generations, it has to be like, it has to be a bit free, It has to be a bit free, like the broadcast rights. There needs to be kind of a discussion. There needs to be some outside involvement as well. And I think there lies the big difference.
Going back now to the actual results over in EU, if we can, switching gears dramatically, we have Misfits, Rocat, and Origen. So Misfits coming in, Rocat and Origen sticking around. Any surprises there of those three teams for you?
It's kind of, at Misfits, they were spoken of very highly, and they were very cocky on Twitter. I think their opposition in the Challenger Series, this split, was next to nothing, but they have shown, mechanical prowess, so I don't think anyone is too surprised by seeing them qualify. Personally, I thought the 3 LCS team would re-qualify, but in Schalke's case, it feels like they were down a very self-destructive path throughout the season. They started off very good, exactly like last split, and then it just became worse and worse. And I have like a good personal connection with most of these players on this roster, and I felt very much that they kind of just wanted to be over with it, and that they weren't motivated at all. And it still comes back to the same point with mental fortitude. I think Misfits, with their players and the players that they have on the roster, it felt like they could be also a team that could be prone to tilting, but they just showed up better on that day. And I feel like Schalke, I didn't get the vibe that they wanted to win, not at all throughout the split.
Not to get too far back into this topic again, but Schalke is a good example. You and I talked about how it was good to have them come into the league, had a professional, established sports organization come into League of Legends like that. Just like that, they're on the outs. Is it a bit sad for you to see Schalke go down because of that factor, at least, not the players necessarily?
It is sad to see, but I feel like, even though League of Legends esports has been around for long compared to other esports, sure, you can compare it to maybe StarCraft, and then all of a sudden it looks very small. But, I think the big difference is you don't have these people, like the people with the knowledge that can help these investors, giving them all the information that they need to run a successful organization. Because, Schalke, they got rebranded, but their staff and all their players, everything remained the same as in Elements. So with that in mind, sure, they got rebranded as Schalke, but nothing changed. So, of course, you're going to have very similar results. Schalke was the exact same team as they were the previous split, and I think therein lies the issue. As we proceed and as we go further in, the investors are going to look to people that have a proven track record and, look to gain the information from them. Because right now, I think a lot of investors, they don't have the required information around the subject, and they look to the wrong people.
Looking over at Origen now, this is kind of a difficult question for you because we're looking far into the future and kind of getting inside the minds of these players, or trying to, but do you think Origen will potentially adjust their approach to the game and get back on the coaching wagon because of this whole debacle of a split they had, or are they going to stick and be stubborn to it because they made it back into the LCS?
I don't know. I feel like SOAS and Amazing truly feel like the world revolved around them. I think the reaction they had when Nils and Mithi decided to leave, the reaction they had towards them was very self-explanatory in terms of what kind of people they are. And I think, in a sense, they are never putting blame on themselves, and I think therein lies the big issue. I think coaches can solve these. I don't want to say mental issues because it sounds very horrible, but I guess I'll just use the word anyway. These mental issues or these mental blocks that these players have. But if you, as an organization, don't believe in coaching, then something is seriously flawed. And I think Origen in general has been run very, very poorly as an organization because I think it is important to always strive for more, and it felt like Origen were content with what they had at all times just because they had success. The first initial season they had a lot of success because they had a lot of talent on the board, but as soon as you start to get comfortable and you don't try to improve your organization or you try to improve yourself or try to improve the team and you get comfortable, then things are going to end very, very badly in the end. And I think Origen just tried to repeat the same recipe over and over again just because, it worked in the past. And eventually the recipe is going to taste very shit.
It seems to. Yeah, when the food gets too old, don't eat it anymore, right? That's the rule. That's the lesson we all learned here from Origen. We'll see. They've got some, talent there, assumedly, but didn't quite come out to this split, and they made it back into the LCS. We'll see if they change their approach or if their heads remain a little too large for that kind of thing. Very deep discussion of the challenger system here in promotions and investment and all that good stuff, but now we get to the really important subject here, the really important topic, and that's the playoffs. That's what we all really care about. Yeah, the real juice here. We start in North America, of course, TSM and Immortals, the automatic buys. No surprise there. These two teams were dominant throughout the regular season split. They were expected to go 1-2, and they did, in that order. Quarterfinals, Cloud9 versus NVS, and I believe CLG versus Team Liquid. CLG Liquid, more of the interesting matchup to me personally. Do you think Liquid has a shot there at taking CLG out of the picture? Because CLG is going to be looking to make a run to the final, I'm sure.
I feel like Team Liquid definitely have a good chance. I think that 6.15 is a patch that is very, very good for their jungler, Darlock. I think Darlock is kind of a mini version of Jankos, and I think Jankos is also perfect for this patch. So I think with that in mind, forced lanes is very, very healthy for Team Liquid because they like to play that lane style and try to get advantages in the early game. But then again, you can't really deny the fact that CUG do have a very, very smart jungler in Xmithy. I don't think this is a jungler that will get eaten alive by Dardock, but I also want to highlight the fact that CUG in the bot lane, I do believe that CUG, with Afromo and Stixxay, have a big advantage in the bot lane. And with that in mind, the first tower is so important in the current meta. So I feel like if CUG take the approach about playing around bot lane and playing around their strengths, I think they have a good chance. But the big issues that lie there for CUG is in their mid laner and in their top laner. And I think sometimes it's harder to hide that. But CUG, then again, they seem to very much look like a different team in playoff settings. When they get time to practice, then they look very, very good. So I don't think you should underestimate that factor. So all in all, I do think CUG is favored, but I think Team Liquid have a good chance to create some good things with Darlock as the main man.
Could CLG, if they get their heads in gear, if they get the form they had at MSI in the playoffs previously into shape, could they challenge Immortals? Could they beat Immortals in the semifinal?
I think definitely they could challenge Immortals. Immortals' track record in playoff settings is not the greatest. I think it is heavily dependent on meta, but luckily for Immortals, the meta hasn't changed for top lane. The top lane is all about these echoes and these Shens, etc. I'm not too sure if our dear friend Huni wants to play Shen, But that is something you can easily ban away, and I think the meta is good for Huni. You know, there is not going to be like this, oh, he didn't play tanks. You know, we're not going to have that debacle anymore. And I do think Immortals in lane phases with Reignover and Huni playing in standard lane matchups, I think they can do a lot of good damage. But then again, Immortals showed a lot of weakness in their mid game where they don't really know what to do. They kind of tend to play around objectives, but when there are no objectives and when Huni cannot split push, they seem very, very lost. So I think depending on how good COG can defuse the dangerous situation up top lane, I think they can have a slight chance in the mid to late game. But otherwise, I think it's going to be a tough series for COG if they happen to beat Team Liquid.
Looking on the flip side now, any chance that Envious can get the better of Cloud9 and stop a Cloud9 TSM match in the semifinals?
You know, Cloud9 versus Envious, you know, Envious' story throughout the split, I remember when we talked about them for the first time, you know, they had this wonderful run where they played a lot of games and they won a lot of games in a row. I don't remember the record exactly, but all of a sudden they, you know, the big question was, are they able to improve at the same steady pace? And, you know, always when you have a team with rookies and players that speak a foreign language, the question is always like, how consistent is this team going to be? In the start, they did very, very good, and then the inconsistency started to show. And I think being an inconsistent team is something that you don't want to be coming into a playoff setting, because their opposition is a team that has a lot of experience. You have a player that has won Worlds. You have players that have been at Worlds and done great things and also bad things, depending on how you view it. But, you know, I think comparing the experience levels, I think C9 is the clear favorite, because I think they have shown some consistency levels in their early game and their individual play. I think their macro game is slightly weaker, but I don't think it matters against MVS. And then looking at C9 versus TSM, I think TSM is the clear favorite, because while C9 have individual advantages against MVS, I don't think they have that at all against TSM. I think it's going to be very interesting to watch the mid lane matchup, Bjergsen versus Jensen, but all across the board, I think TSM just have a slight edge in every lane matchup, including the jungle. And with that in mind, you know, that is just the start of it. I think macro-wise, TSM also have an advantage, and I think it is crazy to think anything else but TSM taking home the entire EU LCS.
So you think no matter who TSM comes up against, be it Cloud9, Immortals, CLG, I guess Envy or Liquid, they are the heavy favorites throughout this bracket?
For sure, for sure.
Is there one team that could challenge them the most reliably, you think, or is it just kind of they're heavy favorites against everyone, period?
I think, you know, I wouldn't necessarily say they are heavy favorites against Immortals, and depending, you know, if COG beat Immortals in a beautiful fashion, like not Immortals tilting like last time, not playing Maokai like last time, then I think the other side of the bracket, COG Immortals, can give TSM a good run. I don't think it would be like TSM 100% 3-0. I think it could be like 55-45. But, you know, TSM have shown great mental strength, and I think last split they did good in playoffs as well, and I think they are a favorite. Immortals, they have very minor issues to fix, and I think it is possible to fix these with the mid-game issues. And I think the fact that they can always play around Huni with Reignover in a standard lane matchup setting, I think this is going to be very, very good for Immortals, because Reignover, Huni can truly cause damage to Hans Svensson. So I think it could be like 50-45.
We'll see then. We'll see if TSM can take the title, if they get challenged, or if perhaps the Cloud9 TSM rivalry will result in some fireworks. Probably not, but you know, maybe. Maybe it could. TSM could be challenged by someone. Now, over in Europe, we'll start at the top of this bracket as well. G2 and Splyce, of course, as you may know, Splyce made past the first round. G2 also doing the same. G2 will get the winner of Giants versus Unicorns of Love. Not a playoff match many expected necessarily. Giants and Unicorns. Both teams kind of finding their way into the playoffs somehow, some way. Giants looking better than most people thought coming into the split, certainly. Which team to you seems like a better threat for G2? Which team can emerge from this playoff match?
Well, it's important to highlight like the way the bracket has changed. In the past, it was full bracket-wise, and it just followed through a bracket. But right now, how it works, I didn't realize when we were talking about North America that we didn't highlight this. But the first seed is always going to play against the lowest seed. So there is no way they face Giants after the first initial series because Giants has the highest seed out of all the teams. So how it works is first seed plays against the lowest seed that qualifies to the semis, and of course the second seed plays against the seed that is the higher one. So in this case, Giants versus UL, if Giants win, we would play against them, Splyce, and of course G2 would play against UL because UL is the lowest seed. But looking at the actual matchup, Giants versus UL, Giants have a very bad track record in best of 5 settings. I think I remember beating them 3-0. I remember that they did very poorly in playoffs against H2K once. I remember beating them in relegations. They just have a general kind of bad track record when it comes to playoff settings. And I think the only thing that was a part of the team during these best of 5s was the coach. And I think the coach is very, very important in best of 5s because there is going to be a lot of adaptation. So I think in terms of adaptation, they have a disadvantage. UL has had a history of being able to spook people in playoff settings. So I think it could go either way. It depends on how crazy it will get with Unicorns of Love, but usually it does. So I have kind of this feeling that UL will take this home, but I can imagine it being very, very close because Giants have shown some individual quality in both the top lane and the mid lane and a very, very good sense of macro play. So I think it can go either way. Personally, I hope that Giants win because I really want to face them in the semis.
That's a good catch by you, by the way. We got so into the matchup, so into the analysis that we forgot to go into the actual rules of the playoffs, which are the high seed, low seed, as you mentioned, but that's fine. Then we have H2K versus Fnatic. Now, two teams who maybe a split or two ago, this match would have seemed very different. Would have seemed like the final, perhaps. Here, it's a quarterfinal with two teams not looking necessarily too great. Fnatic having some struggles, some coaching changes even. Which team do you think comes in here with a better shot? And perhaps before we get into that, what do you think about Fnatic's coaching change, actually?
I think, these coaching changes, these sudden coaching changes, the only other scenarios I've seen them in, and the only thing I can take example from is traditional sports. And usually these changes are good short term, so maybe it works out for Fnatic. But, Fnatic, I feel like you could never count them out to be a threat in a playoff setting, but I feel like that threat is now gone with Taylor being gone. I think, Fnatic, you can never really count them out when it comes to playoffs, but the shape of the team and this change just seems a bit crazy to me, and I think it is a risk. Maybe it's worth taking because Fnatic certainly look like they are in shambles. So maybe it's a risk worth taking, but right now I can't see it paying off. H2K, I think the meta 6.15, this is Janko's meta. I think Jankos is the ultimate jungler for 6.15 because this guy is the first blood king, and that only happens in standard lane scenarios. And then they have a bunch of players that are very, very good individually, and I think H2K looks like a very, very dangerous team that could, looking at the three teams I imagine going to Worlds right now, I see H2K, us, and G2.
You don't see Fnatic, perhaps, going to Worlds?
I just don't see Fnatic because, the biggest advantage Fnatic always had was they had very good level ones, some kind of crazy strategies in level 1 that always gave them an edge, and then Spirit tried to do crazy things and very risky things. He gambled a lot, and it kind of worked out for him in these lane swap scenarios. And now when Yellow Star and Reckless are forced in standard lanes, I think it is going to be a very, very sad story, because I think whenever Reckless and Yellow Star ended up in standard lanes, they just kind of collapsed, and they had to kind of lane swap every game, and then it worked for them. But when that's gone, I think Fnatic is also going to be gone. And I think, you know, it kind of goes to show how big of a deal Huni and Reignover was for Fnatic, because I think their draft, Fnatic's draft, certainly got a lot weaker ever since Huni and Reignover departed. And I feel like Immortals have the Fnatic draft that they used to have during the Huni Reignover era. And I think it truly shows the credit that Huni and Reignover deserved. And I think people gave that to Yellowstar and his crazy shot calling, but I don't think that's a judgment you can make from the outside. And I think right now we can see the evidence and the proof of who was truly responsible for the success of the previous Fnatic.
What goes into a team's motivation for cutting a coach before the playoffs? It seems like a really poor time. I'm not sure what benefit, like, if you assume the benefit of the doubt, what benefit could there possibly be from cutting a coach before playoffs?
Well, you know, it is important to highlight that Daylor himself stepped down.
Sure.
He stepped down, and it felt like, you know, I think they've had Nico De Pico for some time now, a couple of weeks ever since he left Origen. And I feel like this is something that has been in motion for some time. I think Daylor is very honest in what he says, with the fact that he truly believes that he cannot improve the situation, and I respect that a lot. And I don't think he would leave the situation unless he truly believes that Nico can do something good with the team, or a change of setting is healthy for the team. And with that in mind, I don't think he would leave the team in hands of someone he didn't think could do something good out of it. But we will see eventually if it was just PR talk or, you know, actual belief in Nico De Pico, because, you know, it's hard to judge.
It is difficult. Getting back to the actual matches here, you think H2K is a solid favorite against Fnatic, I assume?
Mm-hmm. I think H2K definitely is a solid favorite against Fnatic.
Now, for G2, who, I guess, besides yourself, which of these four teams, besides Splyce, has the best shot of upsetting G2 in the playoffs?
So, you know, the reason I mentioned that I want Giants to win is because if Giants wins, then G2 will play H2K, and that's perfect for us.
Ah.
I truly want H2K to play against G2, because I think H2K, I think this is going to be the third team that goes to Worlds. I think H2K can certainly try to do some damage to G2. I think G2 is the clear favorite, but H2K, you know, the big question with H2K is, like, how are they going to handle the playoff settings? Jankos, Vander, Odoamne, Forgiven, they all have a history of doing poorly in best-of-5 situations. While on paper they look very, very good, they usually just kind of drop the ball when things get important and when things, you know, get heated and the pressure is on them. So with that in mind, you know, the big question is, you know, I'm kind of hoping that G2 tilt H2K to the ground after a good series, and then H2K lose the third place game, and then we get auto seed to Worlds. Yay, that would be perfect. But I do think H2K can put up a fight against G2. I think G2 is still the favorite. Even against us, I think G2 would be the favorite. They're just the favorite to take everything home.
Well, you mentioned some players having some playoff troubles and not knowing how they're going to perform. Let me ask you, your team has some newness in the playoff here. How is Splyce going to perform in the playoffs? How do you feel about your team's confidence level and the comfort level going into a very different situation now, not only as a playoff team, but as a favorite in the playoffs?
I feel like, you know, outside things have never really mattered. You know, people have shit-talked us, people have praised us, you know. It's always fun to read. It's fun to see praise as well. It's fun to see negative comments too. But I feel like what we've managed to build and the players that I have right now that I'm so happy with and so proud of. I feel like we are truly prepared for a best of five scenario. You know, we even have experience as a team to play a best of five. We played one relegation that went to 5 games, so we understand the mental fortitude that is required to pull through in these situations. And I feel like the entire season has led us to prepare into best of fives, and I think we have the correct mentality coming into best of fives. But then again, you know, you have a point in the matter that we haven't been in playoff scenarios before, we haven't been the favorite before. So that is very, very different things, and these are things that could affect us, but I will try to make sure that they don't.
Now, in the matchups, do you think you have a good chance to take down Giants should they get matched with you? Do you feel good about against Giants?
Well, you know, it's like we played against them 4 games. We dominated them 4 games. I think 1 game kind of ended in a Baron steal. So I guess I could say that we dominated 3 games. I feel like against Giants, you know, it feels like we are in their head. You know, Smitty J, he's a good player, but every time Wonderwear plays against Smitty J, he just solo kills them. And I feel like I have some kind of mental edge over the Giants coach because I don't know. Sometimes when I look into his eyes, he looks scared somehow. And, you know, my history against the Giants coach in terms of best of fives are in favor for me because I've won 2 best of fives against him. So I think that's going to be in his mind. So with that in mind, you know, I'm happy. It's perfect for us if we play against G2, Giants, because I feel like we are in their head somehow.
Are you excited?
I'm super excited. I think you can see it. I'm super. I don't even, you know, when I started talking, you know, everything just went through my mind. I was like, oh, playing against G2 in the final, you know, I went crazy. But of course, I need to calm down a bit and just, you know, breathe and just see how it goes.
Well, I asked Trashy about playing at Worlds, and he said he'd be very excited, of course. He's had a long journey to get there if he does make it there. How would you feel with your team going on the world stage, going across America to the different big venues with big crowds and just the whole experience?
I have a feeling, you know, when we have the ceremony to go on stage that the Worlds always has, I have a feeling I will cry, you know, because I feel like, you know, I've had a very long journey in League of Legends esports, and there's been I've been down low and I've had my small ups, but never that big breakthrough. And I feel like right now with my boys, we can make this breakthrough that I've been wanting and waiting for a very long time and kind of working hard for, because I feel like the rest of the guys feel the same, that we are working hard for a goal, for kind of this team goal, this family goal, and it would be amazing to see it all pay off even more than it already has, because our journey already is amazing to look back at, and I am super proud and happy that I'm with these guys that I have.
Anyone not rooting for you is obviously insane. You are the team to cheer for as Splyce moves forward here. I'll ask you, as a coach, like, it must also be exciting to prepare against teams from each region, preparing against teams from the LPL, from the LCK, from the EU LCS. The difference is you have to take on the challenge tactically to have all this preparation come together, and the wildcard teams, who we know can take games off of teams from the big regions now, having to do all that prep, having to cram all that in and make it work for your team.
Holy moly, you know, that's a part of me, you know, there's a sentimental part of me that is like, oh, my boys, you know, history, blah, blah, you know. That is one part of me, but the other part of me, like, is the, holy moly, this is what I want to do, you know, I want to giggle or something, you know. Preparing for international teams is so different because they are so different, you know. Europe, every region has a style and kind of their own spice and their own pizzazz somehow, you know. Even though we're playing the same game, the same champions, there is something always that is different, you know. And I think trying to dissect a region like very thoroughly is something that I'm super excited for, but I can't get ahead of myself because, you know, I still need to dissect Europe before we move on to Worlds, right?
You have to dissect them. You have to dissect G2 and Giants.
Yeah.
Yeah. Get them on the table. Take them apart.
For sure, man. For sure.
So your nerves, I guess, you got to calm those before you calm the rest of the teams.
Yeah, it's just, I don't really believe in nerfs, Like, from my perspective, I think you have this weapon in your head that you can kind of, either it goes against you or you can use it for good. And I think with anything in life, anything that is powerful can be used for bad and can be used for good, like nuclear energy, right? And I think the mind works the same way. And I think if, from my perspective, I don't believe in nerves, so they don't happen to me. But I'm still excited for the things that might come. But when it's crunch time, I'm gonna try to calm down. It's just, when I'm talking to you, Jared, it's so easy to open up, about all my emotions, etc. Because I always need to hide them with the players. I need to be strict, etc.
Right.
But with you, Jared, I can just open up.
I get that a lot, actually. They're not listening. They're not listening. Don't worry about that. They're focusing on their games. You're focusing here with me. It's all good. I look forward to seeing Splyce and Staples Center in the final against SKT.
That would be hype, man.
That's what I look forward to.
That would be super hype.
Yeah, so I look forward to. It's going to be good. It's going to be exciting. I'm excited for it already. I'm excited on your behalf, as a matter of fact. I really am. Now, we don't want to end on too sentimental a note. That's too much emotion. Let's get back to the analysis here, the raw, hard League of Legends analysis. New champion, Kled. What a name. Kled. Coming in hot. He rides a different thing. He is a thing, riding a thing. Your thoughts on this this champ from what you've seen, his mechanics, how he looks in terms of how he plays? What's it doing for you?
I feel like, his mechanics are in a sense nothing super special. I think the ultimate certainly is very interesting, but it really, really comes down to numbers. What is the cooldown on its passive? What is the movement speed you get from ultimate? Because in the current state, it looks kind of ridiculous, the amount of movement speed you get from the ultimate together with your team. It looks like everyone has a sign ultimate activated, and movement speed is always a stat that is very relevant because getting clean engages off is very important. But I feel like this champion, in a sense, what is the cooldown on passive? Very important. What is all these numbers that are going on? Because it is just kind of it's just people. It's going to be like a stat race. If you go into top lane, like how well is it going to trade into all these matchups that are relevant right now, like Fiora, etc. And I think the numbers are going to be very, very important. But I think it is going to be very, very difficult to balance this champion. I think either it's going to be complete garbage or it's going to be completely broken, because I think it will be hard to find a borderline where it's useful, just because it's so reliant on stats and numbers, because there is no kind of mechanic that helps this champion out being useful in scenarios where it is not ahead. I think some other champions, you could, the latest designs, for example, I'm thinking Bard or Azir and Echo, they all have interesting mechanics that reward you for doing very, very good things, like good mechanical play, like the Echo W or the Azir Ultimate. Then you have these mechanics that for sure can impact the game heavily. But I feel like this champion is just a stat bot, and I think the ultimate can be interesting, but the big question is how useful can the ultimate be? If it's going to be some super movement speed thing like it is right now, then I think it can have a very healthy place regardless of its stats.
Do you think it's good to have some stat monster champions, instead of just having the weird design champions every other time? Is it good to have a few that are just kind of more traditional in their structure?
I personally, I love the designs that Riot is making right now. I think the champions that have a lot of depth are certainly more fun to play. I think everyone loves to play Bard, everyone loves to play Azir, everyone loves to play Echo, Thresh, or all these champions that have a lot of depth. I think these champions are always more fun to play because it feels truly rewarding when you do something correct. I don't think it feels too rewarding to just punch people down. And we have those kind of meaty stat bosses like Jax, for example. That is one, but still there are some mechanics to it. You can jump on wards, you can do things, jump around. There are some things you can do, But then the biggest contrast is probably Dr. Mundo, which is just the biggest stat monster ever. But I don't think Kled is that bad. I think still, you can do some cool things with the gun, etc. But it is, I'm just comparing it to the designs that are closer to its release, and I don't feel like it's too interesting. And I think the numbers are truly going to be what matters here.
Hard to answer this, but I guess if you think the numbers are what matters, it's kind of an easy question to answer. Is he looking competitively viable to you, or it's just a matter of how good his stats are when he comes out?
I think, with the current state of the Ultimate, I think it might have a place because engage tools are very important, and it's rarely you see any team engaging besides, an Ashe Ultimate or Silver Ultimate or a teleport. So it's fun to see more engage tools being thrown in there. I think the stats are very important, but I would be very, very impressed if this champion would be balanced. Either it's going to be useless, I think, or it's going to be broken where it's not going to be played at all.
We'll see. I anticipate broken on release, usually a good safe bet, because then you have to buy the champion, right? You have to pay for it. That's how that works.
Skins.
Yeah, and then you nerf it after that, and you get it back down to earth. So we'll see. Playoffs coming up, promotions done, exciting time. Worlds very close. It's on the horizon. You can see it. You can smell it. You can smell Worlds. When the international hits, the other thing that goes on, that's how you know we're getting closer to the World Championship, to the World Championship. There's no Tula, just one, just the one League of Legends World Championship. Don't get confused there. I look forward to seeing Yamato and Splyce at Staples Center in LA, not just at Worlds, in the final against SKT, and they won't get swept. CLG, they'll win at least a game. At least a game. Book it. You heard it here first.
Put your money on that.
You can back that up, right? You're gonna back me up on that?
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Sure. Just put all your savings on that. That's gonna happen, man.
All my
Staples
savings.
Center,
Wow.
2016.
I'm gonna get invested too. You think you're invested in this? I'm gonna feel really invested when all my savings are on Splyce's wins. We'll see what happens. I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to the playoffs coming up. Cloud9, Envy, who is that? TSM, Immortals, Splyce, G2, Unicorns of Love. Maybe some York play coming up for us in the playoff. Looking forward to that, as a matter of fact. It's all coming to you soon. Thanks for watching tonight. If you like the show, follow the channel. It's right down there somewhere. And be back here next week at the same time in the same place, discussing the same game but different things about it. Look forward to that. Thanks.